It all starts in a brutal world where the strong devour the weak, and our main character has had a rough life, stuck in a reality where if you don't have power, you lose everything. Even your own life can get snuffed out without a second thought. Just then, a giant sandworm bursts out, swallowing vehicles whole in the desert. It's precisely because he's weak and pathetic that the young man is now on the verge of biting the dust. About 100 years ago, a terrifying beam of light slammed right into the planet. This mysterious energy soon began to consume every living thing that existed there. Before long, the old blue planet, that once teemed with so much life, was completely transformed. It quickly became a gigantic, sandy graveyard. The few surviving humans were left with only one option: build a fortress and try to hold on. The MC reflects that if the goal was to destroy everything, it made no sense to leave just these worms behind. Suddenly, a violent punch smashes into the seat right next to him. The attacker scoffs, saying his hand just slipped by accident. With a sarcastic tone, the big guy apologizes and demands to know the kid's name so he can make it up to him. Annoyed, he replies that his name is Xion. The guys burst out laughing, making fun of him for only having one name and asking if he's got a bunch of dads or something. Noticing Xion's furious glare, the bully keeps provoking him, enjoying the kid's anger. Sitting down next to him, the man tells him to wipe that look off his face. Since everyone on the bus heading to the mines has one thing in common: they aren't real miners. Curious, he asks what Xion got busted for, suggesting he must be a criminal or a fugitive involved in assault, fraud, or theft. But before he can finish his sentence, he lands a solid punch right in Xion's face. The impact of the blow sends the kid flying against the vehicle's window. The attacker tells him he was wrong and asks if the kid wants to know the truth. He states coldly that the real reason he's there is murder. In his view, he didn't technically kill each person, because in Neo Soul, only the powerful earn that title. He considers the victim just another piece of junk in the scrap heap, a rat who tried to steal his stuff and ended up getting himself taken out. The problem was, the victim turned out to be the brother of someone influential, who threatened the attacker before he croaked. The mention of that name sends Xion into complete shock. When it comes down to it, if the strong are considered people, then Awakened is treated like a god above all others. And that insignificant rat ended up offending one of these very deities. Trying to escape the wrath of this powerful man, the bully panicked and hid on the mining bus to save his own skin. Cutting off the rambling, Xion asks seriously if the guy is done with his story. The bully suddenly notices a cut on his own hand and starts freaking out, with no idea how it got there. Seizing the opening, the MC lands a powerful kick straight to the attacker's face. Unable to defend himself, the man stumbles backward, groaning in pain. The big guy quickly grabs Xion by the neck, furious, warning him that he's crossed the line with this little game. He curses, outraged that he fought so hard to escape one Awakened just to run into another problem here. Preparing to teach the kid a lesson, the man emanates a brilliant energy, revealing to everyone that he is also an Awakened. The other passengers on the bus go into a full-blown panic when they realize what's happening. All the commotion causes the vehicle to lose control and swerve violently on the sandy road. Annoyed by the jolt, the attacker yells at the driver to drive properly. However, when they look at the cabin, they realize no one is at the wheel. The big guy tries to complain again, but he freezes the moment he looks out the window. The bus wasn't heading to the mines like everyone thought, and is now plummeting in a free fall. Completely terrified, he can barely finish his sentence in the face of the horrifying sight. Xion also realizes the inevitable fate awaiting them down below. The harsh reality is that they were sent as nothing more than a snack, straight into the gaping maw of the sand monster. All the passengers fall, screaming in absolute despair. Reflecting as he falls, Xion feels his life has always been a tragic repeat of this same helpless situation. Whether it was suffering on the streets, facing down the Awakened, or becoming monster food, none of this was new to him. Because the only rule of this world he knew was that the strong would always take everything from the weak. Accepting his cruel fate, the kid becomes completely apathetic. He concludes that he's dying simply because he's a useless nobody with no power. Amidst the darkness, he laments that fantasizing about being stronger now is just a meaningless delusion. Suddenly, Xion's hand breaks through the arid surface. A spiral of sand begins to form rapidly in the silent desert. The MC's eyes snap open, glowing with intense energy. He bursts violently from the ground, gasping for air. Completely out of breath, he clutches his chest, trying to recover from the mortal scare. A mysterious energy now flows directly through every bone in his body. Looking to his side, he sees the destroyed carcass of the enormous sand monster. He's in total shock, unable to understand how he survived something impossible. The sound of his heartbeat echoes across the ruined desert where the enormous tower lies buried. This constant pulse seems to be the only living thing in the midst of that immense, devastated city. Each beat reflects intensely in the boy's glowing, newly awakened eyes. He observes the massive floating structures that make up the chaotic and grim scenery. Gritting his teeth, adrenaline continues to pump through his veins. The destroyed planet waits in silence for a new destiny. Suddenly, the dormant power finally takes complete control of his vision. Instinctively, Xian conjures a colossal blast of sand with his own hands. The destructive power slices through the air like an uncontrollable storm, sweeping across the area. Standing firm in the center of the crater, he declares to himself that he will stay alive. Even trapped in this cursed world, where everything has turned to dust, he refuses to give up. Walking forward with heavy steps, he vows to survive no matter what. The mysterious marks on his face glow, matching the determination of his promise. Leaving the colossal carcass behind, he burns it into his mind that he will fight, whatever the cost. Feeling every cell in his body pulse intensely, the MC finally understands the power he has just obtained. Clenching his fist tightly, the boy finally realizes this is an awakening. However, the calm is short-lived. As a colossal sandworm re-emerges, roaring loudly in front of him, the creature attacks mercilessly, smashing the ground with brutal fury. Just then, a man leaps from above, heading straight for the monster and calling it out for a fight. Stating that the beast is in his way, he prepares a punch to use it as a guinea pig. The warrior's eyes gleam with a deadly intensity just before impact. With a thunderous force, he lands the blow, creating a shockwave that sweeps across the desert. Caught off guard by the explosion, the MC is thrown back, screaming in pain. Coughing up a ton of sand, he props himself up on the ground, trying to figure out where that guy came from. Completely stunned, Xian can barely form a sentence as he processes what he just saw. Nearby, a girl complains that the creature is too squishy and must have eaten something nasty. The warrior, still on top of the monster's carcass, wonders if he should head back down. With his massive sword resting on his shoulder, he casually considers the idea of going to the first floor. The rest of the defeated monster collapses violently to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. Clutching his own injured arm, the kid thinks this whole situation is completely insane. Impressed by how easily it was killed, Xian finally understands the level of a true Awakened. Just then, the girl runs up to the warrior, praising the strength of Captain Zhang Yong, bum. Hugging his arm, she celebrates their record time, while the kid has no idea where she came from. Even though he finds the captain's strength surreal, Xian is startled when the girl grabs his left arm. Smiling at her companions, she confidently states that this creature isn't a tough opponent. In silence, the group's leader begins to stare at the newcomer with a suspicious look. The girl keeps pulling the boy's arm, wanting to show her new discovery to the team. Bursting with energy, she focuses entirely on the young survivor. With absurd strength, the girl simply starts dragging Xian across the desert sand. Unable to react, he just lets out a groan as he's hauled away. Super excited, she asks everyone to guess their new friend's rank and ability, building up the suspense. Lifting the boy's arm in celebration, the girl suddenly stops, realizing something is wrong. Already annoyed with the situation, Xian pulls back, cursing her for the tasteless joke. Pointing frantically, she yells that the kid simply doesn't have a rank insignia. Thrown to the ground, exhausted, he hears the girl question how an Awakened cannot have the official mark. From inside the armored vehicle, one of the members yells for them to hurry up because sunset is approaching. Holding onto the boy, the girl asks the captain what to do, warning that he'll perish if he's left here. The leader maintains a stern expression, carefully analyzing the situation. Noticing the heavy stare, the MC gulps, waiting for the decision. Without much ceremony, the man orders them to throw the kid in the vehicle, since his destination was probably the mines anyway. Right after, the military jeep takes off, kicking up dust across the orange desert. Inside, the driver is giving the captain a serious chewing out for always rushing in alone without listening to anyone. While the lecture is in full swing, Zahn relaxes in the corner, finding the ride surprisingly comfortable. Lying there with the sway of the vehicle, he gets lost in thought about the missing mark on his arm. The memory of the blinding light shining on his wrist during his awakening comes back to him vividly. Looking at his own tied-up hand, he is absolutely certain that he awakened a power that controls sand. Intrigued, the young man wonders why the others can't see his insignia at all. Looking very closely, he finally notices that the lines on his wrist are the exact same color as the surrounding sand. This reminds him that the color of the insignia's glow always matches the affinity of the person's power. The blue-haired girl had explained earlier that magic-type users have a blue color. Meanwhile, warriors focused on physical combat always display an intense red glow. Staring at his own hand, he reflects that although there are rumors about rare affinities, his is one of a kind. After all, a power capable of freely manipulating sand is something he has never heard of in his life. Even though his insignia marked him as the lowest F rank, he feels its potential is infinite. A confident smile forms on the boy's face. Determined, he promises to hide his strength and endure everything quietly until he can master this gift. Because deep down, he knows that this entire desolate desert will eventually become his personal playground. The jeep finally arrives at its destination, revealing colossal facilities carved into the canyons. Walking through the site, Xian observes the watchtowers and finds the mine structure surprisingly normal. The guard tells him to shut up and follow him quickly, but the young man retorts, asking to be untied first. Further back, the captain receives confirmation that the boy was indeed the sole survivor. Unconcerned, the girl stretches, telling the leader not to worry his head about a mere coincidence. With a heavy expression, the man immediately disagrees, insisting it was no accident. His gaze remains fixed and thoughtful as he replays the details of the scene in his head. The image of the perfectly circular hole carved in the desert sand won't leave his mind. Walking through the dark tunnel, the boy regrets not asking for the captain's name, feeling they'll meet again. As he exits the passage, he comes face to face with a bustling underground city. Several people are working, talking, and preparing food in the cramped and noisy alleys of the mine. Surprised, he comments that people actually live here, but the guard tells him to shut his trap and wait, questioning if he's just going to be dumped there. The young man is quickly threatened with a bullet to the head. Full of attitude, the officer warns that a piece of trash like him couldn't do anything anyway and leaves. Calling the guy a moron in his head, the MC decides to use his free time to hunt for some food. He soon finds a skewer stand and excuses himself to the old man grilling meat. However, the boy's eyes widen when he notices a peculiar detail on the wall right behind him. An old propaganda poster displays a motivational phrase asking for their work to illuminate Neo-Seul. Handing over the meat skewer, the vendor asks ironically if the young man found the message inspiring. Showing his calloused hands, the old man reveals that the true source of the capital's energy isn't mana stones. Taking a bite of the food, Xian is confused and asks what the alternative is then. Pointing his knife directly at the boy, the old man responds dryly that the energy is them. With a grim smile, he explains that rats like them are the real human fuel used to keep the city running. The vendor comments that the boy talks too much for someone so young and asks if he's already preparing for the afterlife. Changing the subject, the old man asks what the experience inside the sandworm was like, revealing that rumors had already reached his ears. Without mincing words, he calls the young man a pathetic brat and warns him that this place isn't some hideout for making easy money. The vendor lets out a mocking laugh, saying it's all nonsense, and points to the side, wanting to show him something interesting. In a dark corner, a pile of boxes and old objects is stacked up, collecting dust. Thinking the old man is losing his marbles, Xian asks what's so interesting about that pile of junk. The man replies dryly that those items are the leftovers of the people who came to the mines, representing the boy's own future. Everyone who arrives here tries to resist entering the mana stone excavations at first, but the constant dread of perishing in those tunnels them sell anything, just to survive a little longer. Little by little, they give up everything, even their own souls, but in the end, they all meet the exact same fate when the mine devours them. Even with the saying that a man leaves his name behind when he passes, he guarantees that a piece of trash like the boy will leave nothing but scrap metal. With a menacing look, the old man confesses he can't wait to see what will be left of the MC. Finishing his meat, Xian ignores the threat and asks how much he owes for the food, getting a shock when he hears it costs 10 sol coins. Utterly shocked, he asks if the guy has gone nuts or if the food was seasoned with gold, since the skewer he just saw tossed out was worth 9 coins. With a strained smile, the young man tries to smooth things over, saying he doesn't have that kind of cash on him. In disbelief, he accuses the old man of trying to rip off a newbie and asks if he's lost his mind. Without a word, the old man whips out a massive butcher's cleaver in the darkness. Facing the threat head on, Xian states firmly that he's not paying a single cent for the food. Suddenly, his expression changes completely as he's caught totally off guard by a swift move. A dull thud echoes through the dark alley during the sudden attack. The boy is lifted by his neck as the old man asks if he didn't find it odd for an old-timer to be running a business in such a dangerous place. Unable to touch the ground, the MC struggles, trying to break free from the crushing grip. Maintaining a calm posture, the attacker clasps his hands and ironically asks what the brat plans to do now. The old man's dense, defined muscles reveal the brutal strength he hides beneath his dirty clothes. Almost out of air, Xian asks him to calm down, stressing that charging 10 coins is ridiculous and pleading for them to talk it out. Taking advantage of the boy's desperation, the vendor smiles and says he's a reasonable man, willing to make a fair trade. He directly demands the mana stone the young man is hiding in his pants pocket. This demand leaves the MC in shock, realizing that gossip about the valuable stone had already spread through the underground city. Holding out his hand authoritatively, the old man tells him to hand over the item, promising to pay a fair price for it. Gripping the cleaver tightly, he grumbles that the boy has no idea the terrible things he's had to do to protect his establishment. Swaying nervously, the boy still tries to stall, asking the old man to let this debt slide or put it on a tab for later. However, the man cuts him off by landing a heavy blow to the kid's face. Right at that moment, one of the mine's goons yells furiously, complaining about the delay and telling his boss to just bury the trash already. The old man doesn't even blink and conjures a powerful blast of magic sand at the intruder. Caught squarely by the devastating attack, the brood is sent flying backward violently. The blast of energy sweeps through the area, kicking up a dense cloud of debris and destruction throughout the alley. As the dust settles, the MC remains standing, trying to process the man's level of power. Grabbing the boy by the head again, the vendor yells, demanding his full attention. He asks if the kid is spacing out or daydreaming, while Zeon just lets out a quiet curse. Seeing no other way out, the young man shoves his hand into his pocket to retrieve what was demanded. Reluctantly, he pulls out a huge, glowing blue stone, handing over the magic the old man wanted so badly. Analyzing the magic crystal up close, the man murmurs, calculating its value based on the impressive size of the piece. He sets the price at 100 soul coins, but Zeon immediately retorts, yelling that it's worth at least 300. Outraged by the lowball offer, the young man points out that everything there is scarce, and he should have sold it as worm droppings. Annoyed with the unfair negotiation, he turns sharply, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Zeon thinks that if he wanted to, he could take down the old man, but decides it's not the right time. Casting a deadly glare over his shoulder, he demands to at least get a lot of change for the precious stone. Agreeing with a cynical smile, the vendor tells him to guard the money well, as the place is full of pickpockets, just like the boy himself. Trying to seem generous on their first deal, the old man allows the young man to choose any item from the junk pile as part of his change. The MC just stares at the mountain of abandoned objects, confirming he'll take one piece from there. Rummaging through the mess, he sighs in frustration, having actually believed he might something decent amidst so much useless scrap. The old man watches, intrigued, noticing how the boy can't pick anything precisely because it's all worthless junk. He finds it amusing to witness that youthful obsession with never wanting to lose out on a deal. Digging deeper, Zeon wonders if there isn't anything better until his eyes finally land on a peculiar object. Holding an old hourglass, he hears the old man explain that it was left behind by a merchant caravan. With no hope of finding anything else, the boy decides he'll take the glass and metal artifact anyway. The merchant comments that he has a very strange taste for useless things, and the kid agrees without paying much attention. As he walks away down the dirty street, the MC casually asks for the old man's name. In a harsh, tired tone, the man yells that his name is Klexi. With a sarcastic farewell smile, Zeon suggests they make sure to never cross paths again. Klexi lets out a lonely laugh in the dark alley, grumbling that you never know what tomorrow will bring. The circular base of the old hourglass rests motionless on the stone floor of the makeshift room. The dark sand continues to trickle slowly through the narrow glass, with about 10 minutes left until time runs out completely. Locked in the miner's quarters, the young man sits on the hard mattress, trying to control his breathing. Tossing his head back in exhaustion, he takes a deep breath. Exhaling slowly, Zeon tries to calm his nerves after a hellish day in the desert. With his eyes glowing in focus, he stares at the hourglass, mentally commanding the sand to move. Concentrating all his newly awakened power on the object, he waits anxiously for any magical reaction. Nothing happens, making the boy click his tongue in frustration as he realizes it has no connection to his ability. Resting his head in his hand, he reflects, discouraged, almost certain it's the first time he's ever seen that item. Even so, a very strange feeling washed over him in the shop, as if the hourglass was there waiting just for him. The image of a gagged girl flashes through his thoughts, bringing a sense of familiarity that seemed to be calling to him in the dark. Suddenly, the room door is kicked in with extreme violence, revealing a completely furious man in the hallway. The brute, named Park Manhwa, calls Zeon trash, demanding to know why he didn't crawl straight to the extraction mine. Without showing a hint of fear, the MC faces the intruder, stating his name and complaining that no one told him where to go. Without a second thought, the big guy lunges forward, throwing a violent punch, but Zeon manages to dodge it just in time by throwing his body back. Seeing that he missed, the man stares at his own clenched fist, muttering indignantly. Absolutely furious, Park Manhwa lunges again and grabs the boy by the collar of his shirt, telling him to shut up. Then, the brute starts landing several blows on the MC, yelling angrily if he thinks he can just talk back like that. He states with hatred that a useless piece of trash, who hasn't even awakened, should just take a beating in silence instead of running his mouth. Just then, an older miner interrupts the commotion with a tired sigh and tells the boy to hurry up and follow him. Atching all over, the young man holds his injured arm as he starts walking in silence. With a dark look, Zeon burns the attacker's name into his mind, promising himself that he will definitely kill him in the future. They soon arrive at the huge, noisy entrance to Excavation Sector 3. The workers there greet the big guy, who quickly orders them to give the newbie his mining equipment. The foreman warns that it will all be deducted from his salary, but the MC ignores the lecture and asks directly what the pay is. Putting on his helmet, the boy is surprised to hear the man say, he was just getting to that part of the explanation. Suddenly, a heavy pickaxe is tossed through the air directly into his hands. Already losing his patience, Park Manhwa yells that the helmet will also be charged and curses the boy, telling him to get to work. Without any mercy, the brute orders them to send the trash directly to the dangerous tunnel 972. The foreman tries to question the order but backs down in terror when the big guy threatens to send him there if he keeps complaining. As they walk, Manhwa warns that he'll kill him if he comes back empty-handed, making Xian scoff and reply cynically just to annoy him. Descending through the cavern's massive structures, the guide laments the newbie's bad luck, arriving on the day the boss lost everything gambling. Curious, the MC asks about the gambling and discovers the mine has all sorts of shady vices, operating just like the capital. Stepping into the rusty elevator, Xian remarks sarcastically that business must be booming with idiots like that brute around. Sighing at his own hand, the young man complains about having to mine, until the man strangely states that he shouldn't get hurt. With a grim tone, the guide reveals that absolutely no one has ever suffered a single scratch in there, then stops the metal cage. Before them stretches the completely dark and terrifying entrance to the feared Tunnel 972. The boy walks out confidently, promising to be back soon, but the miner coldly interrupts, guaranteeing he won't be returning. Behind the bars, the old man explains that many people have mysteriously disappeared in that dark tunnel without leaving a single trace. Feeling the weight of guilt, the man apologizes for the situation and thanks the boy in a farewell tone. He acknowledges that the young man is being forced into a hole where no one else would have the courage to step foot. Realizing the trap, Xian panics and starts yelling desperately as he watches the elevator go up, abandoning him there alone. Completely stranded in the darkness, he mutters in disbelief, trying to process that he was really left behind in this godforsaken place. Filled with rage, the MC swings the pickaxe, cursing everyone for throwing him in there just because of some moron boss's bad mood. Taking his frustration out on the rocks, he wishes they would all rot, but ends up accidentally letting the tool slip from his hands. The object flies straight into a mysterious crevice in the wall, making the boy yell for his pickaxe to come back. Cautiously advancing through the cave, which is filled with a dense fog, he wonders what kind of bizarre place this is. With a cooler head, the young man realizes the tunnel is flooded with magical energy, something ordinary humans wouldn't be able to sense. The pressure increases with each step, leading him to deduce that any normal person would have already perished from overload if they got this deep. Reaching the end of the dark passage, he peeks carefully from behind the rocks to see what awaits him. Immediately, his eyes light up with relief as he spots his tool lying on the ground just ahead. Stepping onto the ground, he lets out a dry laugh, noticing the handle is broken, but tries to be content with having found it. However, the relief is short-lived as he realizes he's standing in the exact center of a huge, glowing red vortex pulsing with energy. In complete shock, the MC's pupils dilate as he faces the gravity of the absurd situation. The ground beneath his feet simply vanishes, and he plummets into the void, screaming in despair as he realizes it's a portal. Gravity pulls the boy's body violently downward, through the magical darkness in a freefall. The broken pickaxe also tumbles through the air right behind him, swallowed by the enormous rift. As he falls, old memories of being beaten on the street resurface, reminding him of cruel people saying he wouldn't last long. In those merciless times, he just wanted a piece of stale bread, but ended up getting brutally beaten for trying to steal food from the stronger ones. Fleeing desperately through dark alleys, the only thing the little boy ever wanted was the right to dream of a future. The aggressors pursued relentlessly, yelling that his miserable life was going to end right there, and promising a terrible punishment. The absolute terror made the young boy's heart race, wishing for just one reality where he didn't have to fight for his life every day. Remembering all this hell, he concludes with bitterness that his one true wish was simply to have a normal life. Suddenly, a dull impact ends the fall as the MC's face smacks right into the arid ground on the other side of the portal. Shaking and confused, he slowly gets up, grumbling about his headache and wondering why the place is so stuffy. Curious, he touches the dark ground and soon realizes he's kneeling on a thick layer of ash. Immediately, a frightening realization makes the young man's expression harden with fear about where he is. The boy curses under his breath, connecting the dots, understanding perfectly what it means to be swallowed by a vortex of magical energy. As he raises his head, the hellish sight of an active volcano surrounded by fire confirms he's been thrown straight into a dungeon. Just then, a violent eruption hurls molten magma into the air right next to where he just landed. Feeling his skin burn, he watches his own hand start to smoke from the extreme heat of the hostile environment. In a full-blown panic, the MC starts running clumsily, cursing and complaining about the high temperature. Stopping to breathe the dense air, he laments that this is real, knowing that tackling a place like this requires a lot of preparation back in the capital. The young man stares at his suit, stained hands, realizing that breathing this volcanic ash for too long will destroy his lungs. With no time to waste, he quickly crouches down and ties his boots as tight as he can to be able to run. Next, the boy ties a piece of cloth over his face to filter the poisonous air and deduces that this inferno must have an exit. With his gaze fixed on the glowing lava mountain, Xian is sure the return portal must be at the highest peak of the place. Determined, he concludes that standing still would be certain doom from the heat, and decides to take advantage of the absence of monsters to escape. Taking the first heavy step on the hot ground, the young man vows to follow the shortest and fastest path possible. Adrenaline explodes in his veins as the boy runs with all his might, shouting his name and reaffirming that he will never give up. Suddenly, his confidence shatters as his foot slips on a loose rock at the edge of the cliff. His entire body tumbles forward uncontrollably, making him curse as he plants into the dusty ground. Sliding down the slope at high speed, the MC desperately pleads to be able to stop before falling into the boiling lava. With a violent jolt, the fall is finally halted when he slams into a pile of jagged rocks. Shaking and covered in sweat, he lifts his face, yelling that a little lava isn't enough to scare him. Completely exhausted by the impact, the young man pushes himself up, forcing his injured body to get off the ground. Rage takes over the boy, who clenches his fist so tightly the knuckles turn white with tension. Absolutely furious, Xian turns to the sky and bellows, cursing the big guy from the mine and vowing to kill the scumbag as soon as he gets out. Exhausted, he resumes his trek, grumbling that getting angry only makes things worse, and decides to focus all that energy on his own survival. Xian grabs his own clothes, promising himself he'll survive this hell, no matter what, and fight to get back. Running nonstop up the hot slope, he mentally calculates that he just needs to make 4 more jumps to reach his goal. Leaping over a river of incandescent lava, the MC focuses only on getting out of there. Completely focused, the boy tells himself not to stop or think, just to keep moving fast. He absolutely refuses to accept his life ending in a horrible place like this. Just then, the young man makes a confident leap through the air, seeking safer ground on the rocks. However, desperation hits hard when he realizes he's falling straight into the gaping maw of a gigantic monster made of magma. The colossal creature snaps its jaws shut with absurd violence, swallowing the space where the boy had been. Right after, the massive beast sinks back into the lava as if nothing happened. The magma bubbles slowly, leaving the environment in a deadly, terrifying silence. That immense pool of fire seems to have devoured the boy completely without a trace. But the sound of rocks breaking on the side of the mountain draws attention. Panting and covered in soot, Xian complains about the absurd heat, shocked to see that even the ash is melting. Staring at his own hand, he celebrates having confirmed he can control volcanic ash, which ended up saving his life. Completely drained from the extreme use of his power, the boy collapses to the ground with a groan of pain. Crawling with difficulty, the MC realizes that the dungeon's environment is far more lethal than the monsters themselves. The intense heat begins to burn his nostrils from the inside, making the boy lose his breath and feel his consciousness fading. Face down on the hot ground, he weakly wonders if this is where his story ends. Refusing this cruel fate, the young man clenches his injured fist with what little strength he has left. He tries to get up, laughing nervously, thinking it's unfair to check out without ever having a girlfriend after vowing to survive just minutes ago. Gathering all his energy, the boy dashes across the rugged terrain. Using his sand power for a boost, Xian jokes, telling Death to take a designer handbag instead of him. However, the enormous magma monster reemerges, tearing through the volcanic ground right behind the young man. Caught completely off guard by the colossal beast, the MC panics and lets out a terrified scream as he flees. Suddenly, he screeches to a halt upon hearing a mysterious voice praising his ability, fearfully questioning if it's Death speaking. Looking up, the young man is in disbelief as the stranger states that manipulating sand is fascinating. To the boy's surprise, the mysterious figure plummets from the sky, heading straight for the scorching monster. Recognizing the face amidst the smoke, Xian is baffled to see it's just a smiling old man falling from the sky. Understanding absolutely nothing, the boy questions how the heck an old man is plummeting from the sky like that. With a manic look, the old man firmly grips the hilt of his giant sword, prepared for impact. Twisting his body in mid-air with brutal force, the old man brings the heavy blade down with everything he's got. Sensing the imminent danger, Xian sees the devastation approaching and ducks to protect his head. The warrior's colossal strike hits the ground, generating a devastating shockwave that sweeps across the entire area. Chunks of rock and magma fly everywhere due to the absurd blast of energy. The pressure of the impact is so strong it drags the boy backward with great violence. Unable to stay on his feet, the MC is thrown a great distance, screaming amidst the destruction. Lying on the ground stunned, he holds his ringing ears, wondering if his eardrums burst and who that monster was. Slowly regaining his senses, the boy looks for the old man and then panics, remembering the fire beast. However, surprise takes over when he sees the lava carcass sliced in half, with the warrior standing calmly beside it. Trembling with fear, Xian realizes that this man is not just any Awakens. The old man's imposing presence, wreathed in flames, makes it clear that he is on an unreachable level of strength. With a heavy step, the mysterious warrior begins to walk slowly toward the boy. Backing away instinctively, the young man gets defensive and fearfully asks what he wants. In an authoritative and direct tone, the old man says he wants to know the brat's name. Flashing an intimidating smile, the old man tells the boy to answer before he finishes counting to 3. Without wasting any time, the man begins the countdown, speaking slowly. Taking another heavy, threatening step, he impatiently warns that there are only 2 seconds left. Terror fills Xion's eyes as the old man ends the countdown, declaring time's up. Paralyzed by fear before the colossal warrior, the MC can barely breathe from the sheer terror. Resting the sword on his shoulder, the old man scoffs, warning that he can force the brat to talk. With a completely murderous look, the old man simply decrees that the young man must perish then. Xion throws his hands up, pleading for mercy in desperation, making the big guy laugh, relieved to see he wasn't mute. Demanding the answer again, the old man finally makes the boy scream his own name at the top of his lungs. Turning his back, the man judges the name as pathetic, leaving the kid offended and wanting to know who he's talking to. In a swift motion, the old man slams his enormous sword into the volcanic ground, kicking up dust. Looking imposingly over his shoulder, he formally introduces himself as Daoden. Quite annoyed, Xion questions what kind of joke this guy is pulling in the middle of this inferno. The boy complains loudly about being insulted for no reason and threatened with his life for nothing. Despite being grateful for being saved, the young man demands to know if he did something wrong, but is quickly cut off by another insult. Ignoring the kid's tantrum, Daoden warns that he was caught in a very dangerous magic trap. The old man calmly explains that it's a phenomenon where the dungeon creates another entrance to release excess energy. The problem is that this opening ends up sucking in any living being nearby as a defense mechanism. Laughing loudly, Daoden finds the boy's bad luck impressive, making Xion mentally curse the mind boss again. Tired of the unprovoked insults, the MC tells the man to stop calling him an idiot all the time. Sighing impatiently, the old man grabs the boy's head by force, telling him to focus his magic into his eyes to understand the situation. Unable to break free, Xion is forced to obey, condensing the glowing energy in his own pupils. The warrior's instruction echoes through the place, warning the brat to stop using normal sight and see the invisible danger. Just then, the young man gets a huge scare as he sees the silhouette of a horrifying beast standing right beside them. Completely shocked, the MC questions what that is, while the old man celebrates that the practical lesson worked. Watching the creature burn, the boy discovers it was a stealth predator that devours idiotic prey without them even noticing. Xion is terrified to realize the monster was face to face with him and his body felt no sense of danger. Swallowing hard, the young man understands perfectly that he would have become food if not for the direct intervention of that man. Staring at the broad back of the walking warrior, he acknowledges that he has already escaped his demise twice because of him. Daoden's surreal skill level and cold demeanor make the MC question just how powerful that man really is. Finally, the boy asks who he's really dealing with, only to be insulted again by the warrior who repeats his own name. Annoyed by Daoden's answer, the MC indignantly asks who he is to have all that absurd power and what bizarre place they're in. Walking calmly through the chaotic scenery, the old man replies that inside this dungeon is his new private hunting ground. Just then, the warrior playfully builds suspense about his own identity. With a mocking look, the big guy tells him to use those magic eyes to find out for himself. The sound of something heavy being dragged draws attention, revealing a bizarre creature emerging from the rocks. Out of nowhere, the volcanic ground begins to glow intensely as a gigantic magic circle spreads across the entire territory. Stunned by the deafening noise, Xion covers his ears in desperation, wanting to understand what madness the old man is up to. Completely paralyzed by shock, the young man is speechless as he witnesses the absurdity forming before him. Macabre wolf-shaped shadows emerge from the flaming ground around him, leaving the boy terrified by the unusual situation. From the other side of the battlefield, Daoden calls for the brat's attention with a very impatient shout. Swinging his heavy sword brutally, the old man warns that if he's worth anything, he'll have to find a way to survive this on his own. Caught off guard by the sudden attack, Xion mentally curses the crazy warrior as he retreats. Throwing an instinctive punch to defend himself, he complains in frustration about the absurd speed of those shadow beasts. With agility, the MC tries to fend off the creatures with brute force, but the swarm doesn't stop attacking. He struggles, annoyed, as he realizes the slippery creatures have surrounded his entire body and are focusing their attacks on his left side. In a swift move, the boy throws a curtain of sand at the monsters to try and create an opening. The dust hits the beasts' faces squarely, slowing their advance for a brief second. But the number of enemies is immense, and soon the MC is pressured from all sides, letting out a groan of pain. Gasping for breath, Xion understands that even using his own visual powers, he can't keep up with the bizarre speed of those things. Surrounded by lethal attacks from multiple directions, the young man concludes in a panic that he's really going to end up a goner if this continues. Looking at Daoden in the distance, he feels like a moron for being about to lose his life after being saved twice by the old man. Completely lost in the chaos, The kid doesn't understand what the warrior is muttering from afar. The old man points his finger impatiently, complaining that his ears are ringing, and he can't hear the boy's curses properly. Ignoring the old man's madness, Zeon desperately focuses on finding a way to see the fast enemies his eyes can't track. Daoden's thunderous voice echoes across the fiery battlefield, calling the boy an idiot and telling him to think of something useful. Holding his injured arm, the MC hears the experienced master promise to prove exactly why he's so dumb. The big guy's instruction is clear, demanding that the boy concentrate all his energy into his eyes and instantly increase his mana purity. With his pupils glowing in intense gold, Zeon obeys as the warrior teaches him to see through magic perception instead of sight. At that exact moment, a shadow beast darts forward at top speed, ready to rip the boy's head off. Using the new technique instantly, the boy fluidly dodges a lethal blow that tears into the ground right beside him. Understanding the brutal lesson, the boy can finally feel the beast's murderous energy flowing through the scorching environment around him. The creature's reddish aura becomes evident in the dark smoke, indicating the exact moment it enters his range. Without hesitation, Zeon lands a perfect counter attack at the shortest possible distance, shredding the enemy with a single move. Catching his breath and looking over his shoulder, he can't believe the old man had already calculated every step of that evolution. Utterly dumbfounded by the warrior's genius, the boy yells, questioning what kind of freak that old man really is. Laughing like a true battle maniac, Daoden slices through dozens of monsters in the air, celebrating a kind of fun he hadn't felt in a long time. A colossal explosion of energy rips through the dungeon ceiling, illuminating the entire cave with the old warrior's pure destructive power. With a macabre smile and eyes gleaming with adrenaline, the bloodthirsty old man starts demanding even more enemies to crush. Leaping suicidally straight into the abyss, he challenges the infinite horde of crawling creatures to attack all at once. A gigantic rock monster emerges from the depths of the magma, trying to swallow the man in a surprise attack. But the immense beast is taken down in the blink of an eye, and Daoden's voice echoes through the environment, deeply lamenting the creature's weakness. With his sword lowered before the carnage, the old man expresses how disappointing it was that he couldn't even warm up. During his annoyed walk through the sea of flames, he complains wistfully about the time when dungeons had many more monsters scattered around to slaughter. From a distance, Zeon internally confesses he almost feels sorry for the brutal beasts in the face of that unstoppable human monster. Silence falls over the vast crater covered by thousands of annihilated bodies, leaving the MC speechless before the brutal massacre. Sighing in relief, the boy innocently comments that it seems the enemies are finally gone for good. Just then, a terrible chill runs down the boy's spine, and he curses his own luck for speaking too soon. A violent rumble shakes the entire structure of the dungeon, making the volcanic floor tremble as if it's about to collapse. Unable to keep his balance, the MC stumbles backward as a crushing pressure fills the air around him. The impact of the presence is so brutal that Zeon drops to his knees, vomiting and struggling not to pass out from pain and exhaustion. Coughing heavily, he tries to understand what that was, and Daoden calmly explains that it's just the final boss's roar. Bubbling magma cascades down as a colossal silhouette of pure destruction slowly emerges from the boiling lava. Wreathed in blue magical flames, the legendary beast reveals its overwhelming presence, instantly dominating the entire environment. In a sheer panic, Zeon stammers in terror, realizing that this immense monstrosity is the true owner of the fiery territory. In contrast, the old man grins wildly, celebrating with great relief that the real challenge has finally shown up. The bestial creature lets out a deafening roar, announcing its absolute sovereignty, revealing itself to be a dangerous crimson drake. The boy questions if that's a real dragon, but the warrior denies it, stating that it's still at least a B-rank monster. The drake opens its giant maw, accumulating an absurd amount of blue energy, instantly confirming the old man's dangerous suspicions. Observing the powerful attack forming, the experienced fighter notes with impressiveness that the creature has an active magic domain field. Daoden scoffs at the rookie brat for knowing about dominated areas, explaining that high-level beasts gain unique battle traits. The old man continues his impromptu lesson, warning that if a monster has a red aura, its abilities are focused on pure direct combat. But the magma's temperature drops drastically as enormous ice spikes begin to impossibly freeze the area, generated by the blue aura. Without warning, the drake fires a devastating torrent of glacial energy, tearing through the abyss's structure toward the veteran warrior. Completely desperate about the climatic absurdity, the boy yells that a powerful magic type like that is totally broken and unfair in a fight. Shattering all logic, a red, cross-shaped rift fragments the colossal ice magic into 1,000 pieces in the air in a single instant. Stunned by the absurd visual, the MC is left speechless, just absorbing the impossible scene of the man subjugating the laws of nature right there. He reflects with an empty gaze that all his brutal effort, prior knowledge, and life experience are completely useless here. The magical beast dives from above in a deadly fury, proving to the boy that next to the monumental strength of that old man, everything is irrelevant. In a kamikaze attack through the icy air, the Drake charges at top speed, wanting to crush the arrogant man who dared to destroy its ultimate magic. In the next millisecond, the colossal beast throws open its monstrous maw, ready to shred its insolent prey in a blind strike. Calm and very confident, Daoden prepares his stance, spinning his giant greatsword to deliver a devastatingly powerful counterblow. With his muscles tense to the max, the old warrior charges toward the imminent danger, letting out an excited cry of pure, bloody challenge. As a final fatal resort, the legendary beast concentrates a destructive magic sphere directly between its clenched, ready to bite fangs. Observing the enemy's final desperation, the experienced master flashes a terrifying, sadistic, ear-to-ear grin right in the middle of the direct confrontation. With the apocalyptic clash of the two extreme forces colliding, the warrior brings his heavy blade down with absolute brutality, smashing the boss into the ground. With a sadistic look and a loud laugh, the old warrior mockingly asks the Drake if the attack hurt. Gripping his weapon's hilt tightly, he tells the creature not to worry, as he'll end its pain personally. Unleashing a brutal blow charged with pure energy, the old man declares that today is the monster's funeral. Meanwhile, the boy runs desperately through the chaos, screaming in terror that the funeral is actually going to be his. Dodging shrapnel alongside the shadow beasts, Zeon curses both maniacs and begs them to talk it out. Just then, the kid is hit by the battle's violent shockwave and lets out a groan of pain. The legendary beast lets out a thunderous roar as it fires a barrage of energy spikes. Struggling to stay on his feet, the MC grumbles, asking them to fight further away, since the impact alone almost took him out. A brutal gust of wind hits the area and temporarily blinds the boy, forcing him to cover his face. Completely immersed in the madness of combat, Daoden laughs like a lunatic, stating that this is way too much fun. He taunts the giant beast, excitedly asking if it doesn't feel like it's in an amusement park too. Then, a devastating attack tears through the volcanic earth, kicking up an absurd amount of debris. Unable to defend himself, Zeon is thrown high into the air by the direct impact of the massive explosion. Flying through the air completely out of control, the kid realizes he's screwed and lets out a curse. The young man's body plummets in a free fall straight to the bottom of the scorching abyss. Tumbling violently across the dungeon's hard floor, he suffers from the strong impact of the fall. The boy bounces off the hot rocks, unable to stop his own body amidst the destruction. Completely battered, the MC's eyes widen as he realizes something terrifying. A menacing glint reflects in his pupil, revealing that his end is approaching quickly. Right above him, the Crimson Drake contorts in the air, preparing a concentrated energy attack. But the old warrior charges right behind it, laughing nonstop, questioning if that's all the monster has. He lands a brutal blow that smashes the beast's head into the earth, calling it a disgrace to dungeon bosses. Even pinned to the ground, the bestial creature continues to accumulate a destructive blue power in its jaws. Noticing the enemy's stubbornness, the master flashes an intrigued smile and compliments the giant beast's trick. In an instant, a colossal pillar of light erupts from the depths, tearing through the entire cave ceiling. Seizing the opening, the monster fires a furious sequence of deadly, freezing spikes. The beast scans the scene with its eyes, searching for its prey, but hears the man's calm voice coming from another direction. Startled by the sudden presence, the boss quickly raises its head. From above, Daoden plummets like a red meteor, crushing everything with his heavy sword. With the crushing impact, the monstrous lizard lets out a deafening scream of pure agony. Pressing his weapon against the downed beast's skull, the old man reveals he spent an entire year roaming the desert just to hunt it. With a serious expression, he explains that the ultimate goal was always to use the beast's heart to forge his magic sword. Staring coldly at the weakened creature, the warrior directly orders it to simply drop dead. At that moment, the hilt of the massive greatsword begins to pulse with a sinister, dark energy. The blade acts like a black hole, mercilessly sucking and shredding the monster's life essence. Right after, the weapon absorbs all that brutal power and acquires an intense reddish glow. The big guy raises the newly forged blade, causing an aura of pure destruction to explode around him. He admires the new strength pulsing in his hands, seeming very satisfied with the result of the massacre. Celebrating with a crooked chuckle, the old man compliments his own weapon, noting it got much more powerful. But the celebration is interrupted by Zeon's exhausted voice, judging the old man for talking to a piece of metal. Praising the master's absurd strength, the boy concedes his victory, while Daoden is surprised the brat didn't turn to dust. Buried in the dirt and all broken, the MC confirms he almost kicked the bucket in that madness. Trying to get up from the rubble, his body gives out and he collapses backward, strengthless. Completely exhausted, the young man face plants pathetically into the dusty ground. He grips the earth with trembling hands, frustrated that he can't even maintain his own posture. Making a colossal effort, Zeon pushes off the ground and finally manages to rise a little. Panting heavily, he celebrates the fact that he survived once again, thinking he's tough as nails. The boy concludes his reflexes improved from taking collateral damage, and the big guy laughs, praising the idiot's resilience. Putting the weapon on his back, the warrior warns that the dungeon will soon collapse, and they need to get out of there. Not understanding, the MC looks on apprehensively and asks why the old man is holding him like that. Instead of answering, the crazy old man just lets out a scandalous, mocking laugh. In a sudden move, he hurls the kid forcefully toward a magic portal, wishing the idiot farewell. Flying through space, Xion screams desperately, cursing the master as a scumbag and stating he's worse than his other enemies. The young man's body passes through the rift and he lands flat on a sandy ground outside. Literally eating dust, he slides across the hot desert, spitting sand and grumbling in pain. Wiping his mouth, the boy asks where they ended up, and the old man steps out of the rift, explaining this is the natural exit. Annoyed by the toss, Xion asks why they didn't just walk out, but the man tells him to shut up and listen. The veteran confesses he needs the boy's sand powers, but points out that he's useless while he's weak, so he'll give him a choice. Pointing to the horizon, the master indicates the way back to the big city, where the boy can resume his cushy life. Changing his tone, he ironically offers the second option, inviting the young man to follow him to become a stronger idiot. Completely caught off guard by the proposal, the boy stammers, asking how long he'd have to follow the lunatic. Shrugging, the old man is honest, saying it could take months or even decades, as the future is uncertain. Pressing the situation, the warrior demands a decision right then and there. He puts it on the line of the comfort of the big city versus a hellish journey with a 99% chance of meeting his maker. In an atmosphere of pure tension, the two stare each other down as the final choice weighs on the MC's shoulders. Wiping the dust from his face, the young man starts to get up, letting out a cynical chuckle at the proposal. Pointing a finger right in the formidable master's face, Xion mockingly asks if he's lost his mind. The kid lays out the absurdity of trading the comfort of a warm bed to wander a godforsaken desert with him. Maintaining his relentless posture, the old man calmly agrees that's exactly the idea. Holding his injured arm, the boy's expression shifts to a determined look as he declares the conversation over. Without hesitating or looking back, he marches toward the dangerous horizon, stating that he'll go with the old man. The boy explains that he doesn't let old grudges go, but he's fully aware he's still too weak to seek revenge. Flashing a defiant smile, the MC makes it clear that his revenge list includes the very man who saved him. Sizing up the difference between them, he acknowledges that the big guy is the most monstrous creature he's ever met. Loving the rookie's suicidal courage, Daoden bursts into laughter, guaranteeing the boy will definitely end up pushing up daisies. With a clenched fist and a determined look, Xion states he's sure he'll become stronger than anyone if he follows the old man. With a wicked smile, the master warns that one day the boy will regret all this certainty. Without wasting time, the big guy tells him to get a move on since the road is long, while the kid grumbles, asking not to be called an idiot. The sun beats down mercilessly in the sky of that relentless desert. Completely exhausted and sweating, Xion begs the veteran to slow down a bit. He complains that they've been walking nonstop for 6 hours, and pleads for at least a quick break. But the warrior just keeps marching with his back to him, completely ignoring the boy's whining. Annoyed by the silence, the MC yells, asking why the old man isn't answering, judging his sudden mood swings. Feeling his skin fry, he suffers in the absurd heat, estimating the temperature must be reaching unbearable levels. Sinking with every step in the soft sand, the young man realizes he'll soon suffer from severe heat stroke or perish from dehydration. Unable to take it anymore, the kid collapses to his knees feeling lost, while the master points out how ridiculous he is for not even using 1% of his own power. The old man slams his sword into the ground and finds it pathetic that the boy is struggling to walk on terrain where he himself has the ability to manipulate sand. Grabbing his head in desperation, Xion yells that it's easy for him to say, reminding him that he only awakened his powers a few days ago. With the utmost coldness, the big guy retorts, asking what's the big deal. At this, the MC argues that he's just a lower-class warrior and not some high-ranker like the lunatic here. Yelling furiously in the boy's face, Daoden tells him to stop talking nonsense, not caring a bit about his power classification. He tears into the kid, questioning if he thinks people are born at the top, assuring him the strong ones just got lucky. Picking up the pace of his lecture, the master asks if the young man is going to give up just because he wasn't blessed, reminding him that to normal people, he's already a very lucky guy. Completely silenced by the brutal scolding, the boy reflects on this so-called blessing he received. Resuming his walk grumpily, the old man tells him to stop whining and figure out how to use his ability, instead of having a useless brain. Looking at his own hands in the middle of the desert, the boy realizes that, in the end, this power belongs only to him. From a distance, the master's voice resonates, saying it's the newbie's duty to understand how to break his own limits and discover how to use his own strength alone. Making an effort not to give up completely, Xion props himself up on his arm to try and get up from the hot ground, being threatened with his life if he doesn't figure something out. The kid finally snaps, and yells back that he got the message. Firmly, he takes a heavy step on the unstable dunes to test a new idea. Focusing all his energy, the MC activates his special ability, causing a gust of sand to swirl around him. Assessing his own range, the young man realizes he can control a 5-meter radius and decides that should be enough for his plan. He notes that the sand is very deep and concludes that if he finds a way to solve the terrain problem, he'll save a lot of breath. With that in mind, the boy compresses the loose grains under his boot, creating a much harder surface to step on. Excited by the successful test, he celebrates that his feet no longer sink and walking has become extremely easy. But the joy is short-lived as he feels his mana draining way too fast, realizing he'll have to scrap the technique because he can't maintain it for long. Changing his strategy, the boy tries to concentrate the energy directly in his legs, feeling immediate relief in the effort of taking steps. Seeing his disciple mix different ideas and use his head to solve the problem, the old man sighs nostalgically, remembering his own youth. Despite the kid tripping and falling repeatedly on the dry earth, the master finds it interesting how he simply refuses to throw in the towel. Analyzing the absurd progress, the veteran notes that the boy's energy control has already leveled up in record learning time. After much effort, the boy finally finds the perfect balance and celebrates upon seeing that the bizarre tactic is working very well. Filled with pride, he runs to the big guy to show that he now only manipulates the exact grains under his soles, making life easier. Totally showing off to the master, the kid scoffs, guaranteeing he's walking in luxury now and challenges the warrior to do the same. The response to his little joke comes in the form of a solid, heavy punch directly to the top of the smart Alex's head. Lying on the ground in pain, the MC hears the old man complain about how annoying he is and warn that wasting energy on nonsense is a quick shortcut to his demise. The young man's body passes out on the sand, forcing the master to panic, yelling at the unconscious boy not to stop breathing. Opening his eyes with great difficulty in the darkness, Xion grumbles softly, trying to figure out where the heck he ended up. Sitting beside a makeshift campfire, the grumpy old man announces that the useless one is awake and complains about the valuable time he lost because of him. Being handed a strange piece of food, the boy notices his entire body is covered in bandages and nasty bruises. Staring at the extremely tough and dry meat in his hands, he's outraged by the pathetic dinner he received. Telling the kid to eat quietly, the veteran decides to use the break to tell an old story from when he was just a young warrior. He explains that in the old days, the weak didn't have to worry about their own survival, as the strong took genuine pride in protecting defenseless people. Reflecting on the current cruelty, the old man laments that the world has changed so much, admitting he could never get used to the brutality of the new era. With no patience for drama, the master gives a blunt ultimatum, telling the boy to stay lying down if he wants to check out soon, or find the strength to get up on his own by the end. Chewing the shoe leather meat with great difficulty, the MC agrees with the lecture, sitting up on the cold sand. Staring into the pitch black night, the boy becomes thoughtful, absorbing the weight of the words and the melancholy story of that tough old man. In the silence of the camp, he recognizes the immense baggage the big guy carries and tries to imagine the amount of memories accumulated over so many decades of struggle. Observing the warrior up close, Xion notices the poor guy can't even chew the tough meat, having to soften the meal with just saliva due to his advanced age. Understanding the survival trick to conserve water in such a dry place, he grumbles softly, lamenting not getting the tip before almost breaking his teeth. With a slight hint of respect, the young man deduces that the rude attitudes are actually valuable lessons, teaching him to fish instead of handing him everything on a silver platter. Back to walking through the icy vastness, the kid shatters his own armchair philosophy, remembering that, to be honest, he's never even seen a real fish in his life. Under the starry sky, the smart Alex shamelessly asks for another piece of the horrible meat, but is immediately told to shut his trap. Just then, the biting night wind hits the boy's battered body, and he lets out a loud sneeze, unable to control it. Shivering uncontrollably, hugging his own shoulders, he suffers from the absurd drop in temperature, cursing this bizarre environment. To make matters worse, he complains in frustration that he couldn't get a wink of sleep the previous night because the loony master spent hours talking to his own sword in the dark. Desperate for a drop of hydration, the boy opens his mouth to ask for water and is surprised when the old man wrings his soaked hair directly into his throat. Feeling a deep disgust with the gross technique, the kid pulls away, spitting out the dirty water, outraged by another disgusting survival secret not shared. With the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, he understands the strategy is to collect dew from their clothes, finally getting why the camp looked like a giant clothesline. Staring at the veteran with murderous rage, the young man internally vows to get strong enough to avenge so much humiliation soon. Interrupting the promise of revenge, the big guy asks if he feels the approaching danger, and the boy responds defensively with a sarcastic remark. Not understanding the warrior's sudden warning, Xion stops in his tracks with a confused expression. Soon after, a disturbing tremor starts to rise through his bare feet, indicating that a veritable stampede is moving beneath them. Tearing through the dawn shadows, a gigantic pack of demonic beasts surrounds the two warriors in the middle of absolute nowhere. Sporting immense horns and bloodthirsty teeth, the mutant hyenas charge furiously, attacking the intruders at a completely unusual time for their species. Pulling his greatsword from his back calmly, Daoden shifts the responsibility to the newbie, asking if he's going to cry for help or handle it himself. Giving no room for rest, the most aggressive monster of the pack leaps straight for its prey's neck with a bizarre snarl. Ignoring the monstrous threat coming his way, the MC points a thumb at his own chest, flashing a cocky, confident smile. Completely surrounded on all sides in the darkness, he opens his arms to face his demise head-on, screaming with all his soul that he'll handle this and survive on his own. With a snap of his fingers, a sharp blade of sand begins to spin rapidly around his hand, revealing that his mana domination has evolved into combat. Commanding the entire ground, a massive sandstorm explodes. Concentrating all his accumulated energy, the MC keeps a sharp eye amidst the total chaos. Enormous sand spikes erupt violently from the ground, piercing the advancing beasts. He furiously curses the monsters, wanting to know how many of those wretched creatures are still there. Clutching his arm, panting, the young man realizes he'll run out of mana and perish before being devoured if he doesn't come up with a plan. Facing the infinite horde, Xian concludes that brute force doesn't matter now, he needs efficient attacks. The boy desperately tries to focus his mind to find a way to fight while spending much less energy. Just then, he extends his hand forward, prepared to test a new combat tactic. However, a hyena attacks by surprise, biting his left arm as he complains, cursing the cowardly beast. Bleeding heavily, the MC grumbles that the beast sank its teeth in, opening a real hole in him. Staring at his nasty wound, the idea of a hole triggers a brilliant spark in his mind. The furious pack continues to advance relentlessly, wanting to tear the newbie apart one way or another. Soon, the demonic beasts close in, running wild through the dark desert. Processing the plan insanely, Xian understands he just needs to create small holes in the targets. In an extremely swift move, he fires a thin sand projectile that pierces through the monster's head. The kid bursts into laughter, realizing he doesn't need to blow the creatures up since a hole in the head kills just as well. Focused on control, the boy reflects that wasting mana in a panic only hastens his own end. Firing perfect bullets, he celebrates the strategy of using minimal lethality for the lowest energy cost. Totally thrilled with the slaughter, the boy laughs, noticing that even the master takes down targets one by one. Far in the distance, the old warrior laughs at the creature, warning that its attack felt like just a tickle. A colossal hyena with red eyes stares down the old man, who curses it as a stinking mutt. Drawing his sword, Daoden warns that he can't let a dog that bites others get away alive. The veteran flashes a terrifying, manic smile, completely thirsty for more carnage. Frightened by the aura in the distance, the MC backs away desperately, realizing the old man is about to do something crazy again. Bellowing at the top of his lungs, the warrior declares that now the real massacre will begin. A devastating explosion of red energy rips through the battlefield, annihilating everything in its path. Hit by the brutal shockwave, Xian is thrown backward while screaming, trying to hold on. Gasping for breath, the boy complains about the big guy's insanity for launching attacks like that with people nearby. A colossal trench covered in blood and monster remains is carved into the desert sand. Standing at the edge of the crater, the kid questions in horror if the master is even human to do that without magic. Swaying nervously, he decides to keep his mouth shut from now on, but is interrupted by a snarl from below. The alpha beast roars loudly as the master complains about the noise and mocks it for making such a fuss. The monstrous creature snarls with fury, releasing dangerous electric sparks all over its body. Surprised by the force field, Daoden immediately notes that this creature is B rank or higher. A violent lightning storm completely engulfs the old man in the middle of the night desert. Watching the scene, the MC screams desperately for the old man to be careful with the magic. The veteran takes the full impact of the extreme electrical discharge, unable to dodge the devastating attack. Completely paralyzed by the shock, the young man is speechless, thinking the man has been defeated. However, the warrior just enjoys the electricity, praising the tingling sensation for loosening the knots in his shoulders. With a completely demonic look, the old man coldly declares that the massage session is now over. Using absurd brute force, he smashes the giant beast's head against the ground in a single blow. Laughing nervously, Xian realizes he was a fool to worry, deciding to ignore that monster for his own mental health. The old man returns, holding the beast's head as the kid excitedly asks if they're leaving now. Curious about the horn, the young man listens as the master explains that the electric item will make a great weapon if properly refined. In a swift move, the big guy tosses an object through the air, telling his disciple to catch it. Holding the old dagger, Xian is bluntly told that he will now have to hunt his own food without depending on anyone else. Slicing up the monster, the warrior explains that the muscle is toxic, but the flank meat is clean and safe to eat. The old man notices the boy's stare and tells him to get a move on, cursing the newbie since the sun will be up soon. Snapping back to reality, Zahn agrees, stammering, as the day breaks, burning the horizon. During their cheerful walk, the MC chews on the piece of meat, finding the meal wonderful. Wiping sweat from his face, he grumbles that he's getting thirsty, but tries to be happy with a full stomach. With his new ability active, the kid advances through the dunes with the greatest of ease. Full of himself, the smart Alec provokes the big guy, asking if he's jealous and telling him to watch out for his age. The immediate response is a punch straight to the cheek that snaps the boy's head back forcefully. With an agile leap, Xian manages to dodge the second blow, bursting into laughter for having escaped unscathed this time. Annoyed with the antics, the old man calls the boy crazy for thinking so highly of himself just for mastering a cheap magic trick. On his knees in the sand, the kid begs for forgiveness, reminding him that he's dying of thirst and didn't deserve to kiss the ground. Complaining about being ignored, the young man suddenly stops talking as he feels a strange, humid breeze in the air. At first, the boy thinks he's hallucinating, but soon notices the master's fixed gaze pointing in the same direction. A breath of hope emerges, indicating the almost impossible presence of an Osis in the middle of that burning hell. Side by side on the high dunes, the two adventurers stare at the scorching scenery, awaiting their next destination. With his eyes gleaming with joy, Xian celebrates in disbelief, having finally found something he only heard about in rumors. The crystal clear water reflects the sunlight, revealing a perfect Osis nestled in the middle of that sandy valley. Desperate with thirst, the boy runs like a madman, counting the days he spent with a completely dry throat. Further back on the hill, the master clicks his tongue with a suspicious expression, feeling that something is very wrong there. Sliding down the steep slope, the MC yells in relief, celebrating the salvation he had been waiting for. Without a second thought, the kid dives headfirst, clothes and all, into the cool water of the lagoon. Floating on the surface, he lets out a heavy sigh, enjoying every drop of water soaking his exhausted body. The coolness washes over him, bringing an absurd sense of relief after suffering so much in the 120-degree inferno. Totally relaxed, the young man's vision starts to blur strangely as he mutters in confusion. Down below in the dark water, a bright, very hot orb of light catches his attention at the bottom of the pool. Completely mesmerized by the glow, the boy starts to lose consciousness, complaining of a sudden sleepiness. Right on time, the big guy's thunderous voice echoes, bellowing for the idiot to wake up. In an incredibly fast leap, the old warrior draws his heavy sword and charges through the air. He closes the distance in the blink of an eye, falling like a meteor directly toward the shallow lake. A gigantic abyssal sandfish emerges from the water, opening its sharp jaws, ready to swallow the boy whole. Grabbing the boy by the collar of his shirt, the master yanks the newbie back abruptly. The bizarre creature bursts from the water, revealing its grotesque, gigantic body. Thrown through the air, Xian gets a terrible scare, seeing the danger up close. The veteran lands firmly on the sand, protecting his apprentice from the deadly attack. Gripping his sword tightly, he prepares for the counterattack. In a single devastating move, the old man unleashes a brutal slash that parts the water. Shocked by the scene, the MC finally understands that this was the famous desert mirage. The beast falls dead, cut in half, as a rainbow forms from the dissipated magic. The big guy explains that this creature lures its prey with the light on its forehead to devour them. Staring at the boy, the warrior adopts a very intimidating posture. With no patience whatsoever, he lands a heavy punch right on his disciple's head. Lying in the sand, the kid hears the master yell that he forgot all his training, just because he learned one trick. Absolutely furious, the old man warns that morons like him are the first to perish in this place. Trembling with fear, Xian agrees immediately while trying to recover from the scolding. Just then, the old man tells him to skin the monster, leaving the boy completely confused. The warrior explains that the beast's belly is soft and perfect for sewing a tunic. Looking seriously, he asks if the boy needs a new set of clothes. But then he starts yelling, telling him to make his own tunic and asking if his brain has turned to stone. The boy just apologizes sheepishly, trying to smooth things over again. Sizing up the carcass, the MC notices that the creature looks a lot like fish from Earth. The veteran comments that the boy has probably never seen a real fish. Honestly, the kid confirms this is his first time seeing such an animal. Wielding the dagger, he mutters nervously that fish are really scary. The young man tries to plunge the blade into the beast's back, but it doesn't cause any real damage. Making fun of him, the old man asks if he's trying to pet the thing and says he'll handle it himself. Refusing the help, the boy grumbles that the hide is too tough and thinks of a strategy. Focused on the task, he begins to concentrate all his magical energy into the cutting weapon. The idea is to envelop the blade with mana to greatly increase its piercing power. He then plans to use the thin fins to create a makeshift needle. Completing the plan, he concludes he can pull the tendons from the flesh to serve as sewing thread. Sitting from a distance, the master scoffs, watching his apprentice turn the monster parts into trash. Sighing deeply, The old man says there's still plenty of material left to try again. Time passes, and a heavy night falls over the vast desert. Holding the piece up in the air, Xian yells like a madman, celebrating that he finally finished the job. Very proud of his creation. He thinks the tunic turned out so well he could even sell it in the city. The big guy gets his attention as the boy hugs the clothing, afraid it'll be stolen. Telling the kid to stop being dramatic, the old man holds out a giant organ from the beast for him to eat. Confused, the young man hears that the gallbladder is a rare medicine and must be eaten whole. Completely annoyed, the veteran warns that if he doesn't eat it, he'll end up kicking the bucket along the way. Dropping the heavy piece in his disciple's lap, the master complains that his arm was getting tired. Staring at the disgusting meat, the boy swallows hard, prepared to face the day's toughest challenge. With a huge effort, he takes the first bite, grumbling that the bitter taste is better than the alternative. Chewing nonstop, the MC is very confused by the bizarre texture of the fresh food. The boy notices that the meat feels like it's made of clouds and doesn't fill him up, no matter how much he chews. Finishing the last bite quickly, he is soon called again by the grumpy old man. Sitting calmly by the fire, the veteran declares that now it's time to burn off some energy. Confused by the statement, the boy suddenly notices his own chest glowing brightly. Excruciating pain hits his body, making him spit blood as he screams in agony from the burning sensation. Clutching his stomach desperately, he realizes the internal heat is becoming too unbearable to resist. The MC feels his mana go haywire, claiming there's a literal sun destroying his stomach. Bellowing at the top of his lungs in absurd pain, he only hears the master telling him to endure the ordeal quietly. Observing the dark night, the old man philosophizes that everything there is like that oasis and will soon disappear into the quicksand. Completing his deep thought, he says that even monsters are reborn in the end, returning once more. The big guy states that this is the cruel cycle of life, completely ignoring his apprentice's roars in the background. Unable to bear the continuous suffering, the young man tearfully begs to be saved from this hellish torture. Completely losing his mind, he swears he'll kill the old man for putting him through such an inferno. Adjusting himself on the dirty ground, the warrior tells the boy to shut up, because he's trying to sleep in peace. The day dawns calmly, and the kid regains consciousness, slowly opening his eyes on the warm, soft sand. The master's face appears upside down right in his vision, asking if the useless one is finally up from his nap. The scare is gigantic, making the MC jump back, cursing the old man for almost giving him a heart attack. Laughing at the boy's face, the old man comments that he slept great, while the kid complains that he just passed out. The warrior then asks how he's feeling, and the boy starts checking his own body, quite impressed. Clenching his fist with great force, the newbie realizes something has drastically changed in his musculature all of a sudden. Completely shocked, he notices his muscles feel like steel wires and his mana flows like a violent storm. Confused by the absurd evolution, the young man wonders how he got so strong so suddenly. Walking through the scorching desert, the veteran reveals that all this new strength is thanks to the devoured beast's gallbladder. The rare organ grants tremendous heat resistance, worth as much as a valuable refined mana stone. Surprised by the valuable information, Xian asks if it's okay to spend something so expensive on someone like him. Laughing loudly, the big guy says he only did it because the boy is too weak and needs to be useful on their journey. Sitting comfortably to eat the roasted meat, the master warns that they're not leaving until they finish everything. After 4 long days of non-stop eating, the warrior notices there's much more meat left than expected. Breaking camp for good, he informs his loyal disciple that it's finally time to hit the sand again. Completely renewed by the food and the miraculous remedy, the boy obeys the command with great excitement. Facing a sinister sandstorm head-on, Xian celebrates that the hostile wind now feels like just a breeze. Following the firm steps of the war veteran, he's impressed by the big guy's immense stamina. Walking through the sandstorm, Xian grumbles to himself that the old man hasn't said a word in days. The boy wonders if the master is going through man-opause. Frustrated with the 2-week-long trek, the MC wonders if the veteran even knows where he's going. Suddenly, a gigantic insect monster bursts violently from the sand right next to the young man, letting out a piercing shriek. Looking over his shoulder, Daoden dryly tells the kid to shut his trap in the middle of the storm. Tired, the boy sighs, asking how much further they have to go, but ends up feeling an impact pushing him forward. Immediately, he turns his head, noticing the threat approaching rapidly from behind. The enormous mutant ant clicks its sharp mandibles, proving to be a creature with an incredibly tough carapace. Looking at his own feet, Xian laments that he just wanted to pass by, acknowledging that this won't be so easy. A wide view reveals that the two are completely surrounded by dozens of those beasts, forming a deadly web. Accepting the fight, the boy crouches down, touching the sand with his hands, and tells all the enemies to come at once. Firing sharp spikes from the ground, he warns that he needs to annihilate the monsters quickly, or the master will kill him for the delay. The monstrous creatures let out shrieks of agony as they are mercilessly pierced by the blows from below. Pointing his fingers like guns, the MC fires small projectiles, praising the obedience of the pierced targets. The magic bullets rip through the air, whizzing toward the relentless swarm. Lifting his head with a sharp look, the young man concludes that fighting during storms is great, because he has infinite ammo flying all around him. Looking around, Xion notices the old man has suddenly vanished and yells in outrage for being abandoned there alone. Running through the soft sand, he grumbles that the warrior has no loyalty, understanding why he's such a lonely old man. Just then, the young man screeches to a halt, internally hoping the veteran didn't hear his insults. The kid's expression changes instantly, prepared to apologize to the master in case the heavy aura in the air was his. Keeping his survival instincts on high alert, he leaps backward, reacting instantly to a dangerous presence on the terrain. Sliding his feet on the ground to brake, the MC realizes the danger he detected is now something completely out of the ordinary. The magical pressure hitting the apprentice's body doesn't belong to a common monster but to the purest, most absolute invisible terror. A colossal army of gigantic ants plummets down the sand dune like a demonic avalanche of legs and claws. Surrounded by the immense horde, the boy is utterly terrified, wondering where the heck that absurd number of insects came from. Swaying from desperation, he turns his head, screaming for the veteran and tearfully warning that there are too many enemies. Far from the front line, Daoden just watches the chaos, sitting calmly on the dry earth. Gritting his teeth hard, the apprentice understands he can't spend the rest of his life begging for help like a weak child. Changing his stance, the boy concludes that the big guy already knew about the army, which means this is another suicide mission. A wave of manic adrenaline takes over Xion, who decides to crush those cursed insects, no matter how many there are. Without hesitation, he conjures violent sand explosions that sweep away the first monsters trying to approach for the kill. However, his confidence quickly vanishes when the MC suffers a violent blow straight to the chest. Unable to keep his balance, the boy's body is thrown to the other side by a new, stealthy blow. Too soon, he retracts all his previous bravado, cursing loudly as he falls backward, swallowed by thousands of furious beasts. Agonizing on the ground, the boy struggles, complaining about the swarm's cowardice, demanding they come and fight him face to face. Staring at the sharp mandibles ready to tear him apart, the young man lets out a curse, accepting the deadly attack coming from above. Using the storm to his advantage, he detonates a massive man explosion under his own body, sending the beasts flying. Seizing the perfect opening in the dust cloud, the kid leaps with all his might, tearing through the air to escape the lethal encirclement. Observing the carnage from above, he is stunned by the sheer size of the anthil dominating the entire scorching valley. A momentary relief washes over him, and the boy plans to find high ground to analyze the situation, celebrating that the insects can't fly. Shattering his logic, a dull impact hits the boy's back with extreme brutality. To Xion's absolute misfortune, a gigantic winged and captures his body mid-flight. The young man's pupils shrink in pure panic, finding it impossible for such a creature to have functional wings. The flying beast digs its claws into the apprentice's body, letting out a disturbing shriek right in his ear. In a merciless dive, the mutant creature charges at high speed back toward the ground, dragging its defenseless prey. With the sharp impact against the hard earth, the air is violently forced from the boy's lungs, and he spits blood, his face contorting. Face down in the sand, the MC coughs weakly, struggling for oxygen amidst the destruction. Lifting his badly bruised and bloodied face, his eyes shine with an unbreakable willpower. High on the cliff, the old warrior hears his disciple whisper his name, calling for attention. An expression of pure, irrational obstinance and defiance dominates the injured boy's dirty face. Cornered again by the bestial shadows, the boy yells for the big guy to watch from the sidelines as he gets out of this hell alive. Satisfied with the kid's attitude, Daoden quietly praises that imbecile's stubborn spirit. Internally, the master acknowledges that in a world reduced to dust, the boy could very well use this rare gift to live in the greatest possible luxury. However, the weight on the veteran's conscience warns him that this easy path would spell the end of any true evolution. Observing the dense tornadoes in the valley, he condemns people who live on illusions, reinforcing that an awakened needs to evolve their own powers. In his mind, the old man rejects the idea of creating just another mediocre, soulless, assembly line soldier. The marks of the past haunt him heavily, bringing back the scars from when the world ended. The vision of a colossal destructive beam tearing through the metropolis from 100 years ago burns vividly in his tired memory. The absolute helplessness before the collapsing city makes the warrior relive the agony of seeing lives extinguished in vain before his very eyes. That apocalypse of flames devoured colleagues, neighbors, his entire family, and even the daughter he loved so much. Extending his empty hands in the agonizing memory, he admits to being the biggest loser for failing miserably to protect his world. Focusing again on the arduous combat in the valley, the master reflects that the boy avoided following that cowardly path. The warrior faithfully believes that by crossing the thin line between life and death, the apprentice will reach any level he desires. A light, sincere feeling of pride blossoms in the lonely warrior's mind. Commanding deadly cyclones with his hands, the MC proves that the evolution generated by the survival instinct is brutal. Overflowing with uncontrolled energy, the kid faces the beasts, ecstatic, asking if they can feel that they're about to be crushed right here. A giant ant crawls on the sand, completely ignoring the absurd level of pressure focused in the air. Magically gathering the grains, the young man creates a massive drill, forming the densest and heaviest missile possible. The improvised weapon cuts across the field, tearing through the wind in a straight line. Combining wind power, gravity, and raw mana into a single, stupidly strong shot, the impact annihilates the entire monster. Raising his arms imposingly, the boy shouts, realizing that his new ability has multiplied his original damage countless times over. Bellowing with a crushing aura surrounding him, Xion decrees to the horde that the time for total extermination has come. Detonating the center of the battlefield, the boy blames the beasts themselves for being incompetent in assassinating him sooner. Watching the luminous spectacle, the big guy crosses his arms, relaxed, admiring his irresponsible pupils over the top excitement. Completely out of breath, the disciple survives in the dust as riddled carcasses rain down in pieces all around. A monumental crater disfigures the ancient desert sands, sealing the boy's definitive victory against the legendary Anthil. Coughing heavily, the MC tries to catch his breath after expending so much energy. He soon yells for the old man, wanting to know if he saw that, but ends up spitting more blood. Just then, a shadow falls over the boy, whose eyes widen, not understanding how that happened. Appearing out of nowhere from behind, a bizarre beast captures the boy's body with its sharp claws. Feeling the blood run, he dismisses the idea of stealth and realizes he's been poisoned. The apprentice instantly understands that this poison is blocking his mana points. Completely outraged, Xion curses the monsters, finding it unfair to be caught like this. However, a sharp blow hits his head with full force. Lying in darkness, he lets out a curse, realizing the situation has just gotten worse. Slowly opening his eyes, the young man notices several pairs of red eyes and deduces he's in the nest. Thrown on the cold ground, disgusting insect noises begin to echo through the dark tunnel. Seeing those crawling creatures approaching, the boy realizes they are larvae. The kid tries to react somehow, but his arm remains completely paralyzed. One of the giant larvae already has its mandibles on his defenseless body, ready to bite. Realizing his body won't move, the boy concludes he's going to be eaten alive right here. Accepting his end, the MC just wonders what to do now, with his demise so close. Expecting his life to flash before his eyes, he questions if this is where it all ends. The disgusting larvae continue to crawl greedily toward their fresh prey. But in a violent impulse, the boy's fist clenches tightly, tearing at the earth. The surrounding ants retreat, startled by the sudden movement of their meal. Trembling with effort, Xion forces his body up, cursing his own weakness. In a fit of pure fury, he yells that he hasn't had a good life and refuses to go out so uselessly. The bracelet on his arm begins to glow brightly as he curses the insects with all his hatred. An absurd explosion of dark energy sweeps across the nest floor in the snap of a finger. The smaller monsters are sent flying, with no chance to react to the pressure. With the brutal impact, the destructive wind continues to slam the beasts against the walls. The entire cave trembles violently, kicking up a suffocating cloud of dust. Seizing the opening, the kid uses his mana to raise a sand pillar, escaping the beasts. Looking at his own hands, he is surprised to see the poison is gone and his energy is overflowing like never before. Staring at the glowing display on his wrist, the apprentice finally realizes he has leveled up. Feeling the new strength, the MC states that his current power doesn't even compare to the trash F rank. Even with this absurd increase in energy, the boy's gaze remains tense and focused. Facing the giant queen ant, he is outraged that she didn't suffer a single scratch. Sliding effortlessly along the walls, the colossal beast advances relentlessly after its target. The monster smashes solid rock as if it were sand, leaving the boy shocked by such brute force. Unstoppable, the creature darts through the tunnel, raising deadly spikes wherever it goes. Dodging just in time, Xion complains in frustration that his previous attacks didn't even tickle it. Clinging to the wall to avoid falling, he admits it's impossible to win a direct battle like this. Seeing the glowing eyes in the dust, the kid understands that a head-on clash is pointless. Just then, the boy's mind starts working quickly, searching for a way to get around that defense. He concludes he needs to find a way to rip the carapace off without having to pierce it. The grotesque beast lets out a deafening hiss, preparing for the final pounce. Concentrating all his mana in his hand, the apprentice decides he will twist and tear the entire armor off. Sensing the threat, the mutant insect screeches even louder, charging the enemy with everything it has. Without hesitation, the young man lands a concentrated spinning blow directly on the creature's head. The energy spirals violently as the MC tries to tear the beast apart from the inside out. However, the boy clutches his head, screaming in pain as he's hit by an absurd sound wave. The queen starts emitting a high-pitched frequency so strong it threatens to explode the target's brain. A massive shockwave sweeps through the space, distorting even the air around the combat. Bleeding from his face, The kid grits his teeth, outraged that the monster hid this trick. But his survival instinct takes over, and he decides to bet everything on one last attack. Unleashing every last drop of mana, the surrounding dust storm grows to chaotic proportions. Ignoring the damage to his own body, the young man decides to see who will fall first. Bellowing at the top of his lungs with blood on his face, Xion charges forward, ready to fight to the end. Then, an absolute silence fills the cave as the final impact reaches its peak. The flash ceases, and the boy is left confused, unable to feel his limbs anymore. Tumbling backward, he realizes with bitterness that he has finally surpassed his body's physical limit. Collapsing into darkness, the apprentice curses his own frame for being so fragile and useless when it mattered most. But before he hits the hard ground, the big veteran catches him firmly by the shoulders, calling him weak. Carrying the unconscious boy, Daoden mockingly warns that sleeping there would be asking for it. Flashing a broken, sideways smile, the kid mumbles the master's name in relief. The warrior grins widely, confessing he left the final blow for the brat to prove himself. Looking at the queen's destroyed carcass, the old man praises the apprentice's courage for fighting to the end. Keeping up his tough act, the young man says his eardrums burst in the fight, and he can't hear a thing. Finding the misfortune amusing, the old man just yells even louder next to the deaf boy's ear. Being dragged by the collar of his shirt without the slightest care, Xion tries to figure out where they're going. The two enter a secret chamber deep within the anthill, illuminated by a mysterious light. Leaning on the ground, the boy's eyes widen in confusion as he comes face to face with a glowing sphere on a pedestal. Understanding absolutely nothing about what he's found, he turns his head and asks the veteran what it is. Shoving the kid's head without mercy, Daoden tells him to eat the queen's egg like it's a strawberry-flavored remedy. The MC lets out a mental curse, disgusted by the mere idea of putting that filth in his mouth. Staring at the glowing sphere up close, he doubts it's even physically possible to swallow something like that. A bit wary, the boy asks if it won't give him a massive stomachache like last time. The big guy replies mockingly that it will probably be the end of him. But the young man still can't hear. Taking a deep breath to accept his fate, Xion takes a bite of the egg, hoping not to check out from indigestion. Chewing on the glowing sphere, the boy admits to himself that he has no idea what a real strawberry tastes like. But as soon as the thing goes down his throat, his eyes light up as he realizes it's incredibly delicious. Excited, he was about to ask if there was another one left, but he suddenly feels something very strange happening to his body. Falling to his knees, the kid calls out to the old man in a total panic, not understanding what the heck is going on with him. It turns out the so-called organ inversion has begun, a bizarre process where a person's intestines twist and turn inside out. This happens because the queen's egg is extremely toxic and forces the poor soul's insides to come out through their pores. In other words, whoever eats this bomb has their organs torn apart by internal spikes until they suffer a terrible, agonizing end. Roaring in pain as his body explodes in sharp points, Xion screams at the top of his lungs, demanding to know what poison the master gave him. Cleaning his ear with the utmost calm, Daoden complains about the shouting and warns the boy that he needs to get used to this to survive. Completely blown out and with a swollen face, the apprentice just wonders how anyone could endure such absurd pain. Unable to hold back the pressure, the MC starts coughing violently, spitting a dark goo onto the cave floor. Completely losing his strength, he lets out one last curse, already feeling that his physical body has reached its absolute limit. Collapsing into darkness, the young man laments his trash life, sad that he thought he could finally trust someone for real. With his face pressed against the cold earth, the boy accepts that in the end, he really was a huge idiot for believing the big guy. Just then, his body goes completely still on the stone floor, surrounded by the enormous spikes that tore through his own flesh. Ignoring the unconscious kid, the master crouches down near the queen ant's disgusting carcass to claim his well-deserved reward. Without any ceremony, he shoves his hand deep into the monster's mutilated guts and pulls out what he was looking for. Staring at the glowing stone, the old man lets out a wicked laugh and celebrates hitting the jackpot with that high-level mana jewel. While he's at it, he comments that the rest of the giant insect will also be very useful and decides to wrap it all up together. Stashing the items in his bag, the veteran stands up, adjusts the sword on his back, and turns his serene gaze back to his apprentice's body. With a slightly heavier, darker expression, the warrior whispers the word, "friend," as if talking to an old partner from the past. Observing the spike-covered kid, he justifies in a low voice that the weak perish, and that is simply his undeniable fate. And with that, the big guy turns his back on the corpse splayed out on the stone and begins to walk away slowly down the lonely tunnel. Continuing his imaginary conversation, the old man states that there's no way to avoid it, as they are completely running out of time to act. However, breaking the tragic silence of the cave, a weak and confused voice echoes, asking why he's still breathing. Turning his head instantly, Daoden flashes a huge grin and excitedly asks if the big idiot finally woke up from his beauty sleep. As a direct response, An absurd explosion of dark energy kicks up a cloud of dust, obscuring the entire area where the boy was lying. Shielding his face with his arm, the master curses the insolent kid, wanting to know what this nonsense is about, kicking up so much dirt. But right after, the veteran's look changes to pure surprise as he feels the pressure of the monstrous aura coming from the boy's direction. Tearing through the dust in a furious charge, the MC runs toward the old man, fuming with the face of a vengeful assassin. Unfazed by his student's blind rage, Daeodon tells the idiot to stop being so dramatic and listen quietly to what he has to say. But Xion simply ignores him, dashing past the old man at a frightening speed that shatters the ground beneath his feet as he mutters indignantly. Unleashing a blow charged with hatred, the boy yells, demanding to know why that scumbag tried to wipe him out. The massive force of the attack generates a brutal gust of wind, proving the kid isn't here to play games and wants answers through a beatdown. With his eyes overflowing with dark magic, he extends his hand, warning with murder in his eyes that he will never forgive this vile betrayal. However, the veteran calmly parries the furious punch with the palm of his hand, as if catching a simple crumpled paper ball. The thunderous impact sinks into the cave wall, creating an immense crater, but the old warrior's defense remains absolutely intact. Panting from the extreme effort, the apprentice finally realizes the abyssal difference in strength between them, even after leveling up. Shocked, the young man can't believe the guy tanked everything without moving, while Daeodon just sighs, calling him a moron for trying to kill him. Amidst the dust, the old man ironically suggests the egg's poison must have rotted the boy's brain and tells him to use what's left of his head to think. Still trembling from shock, Xion can barely process the fact that his best attack didn't leave a single scratch on his enemy's skin. Shaking his head in disappointment, the master explains that it would be foolish to waste poison on a brat he could kill with a simple flick. Coming back to reality after the embarrassment, the MC lowers his gaze, super embarrassed, and agrees that the big guy's logic, unfortunately, makes perfect sense. Turns out, depending on how it's used, that lethal egg works as a sacred remedy that purges the body's impurities through extreme pain. Besides the deep cleans, the substance fills the empty space with pure mana, something the boy himself must have noticed when he threw that punch. Clenching his fist, which is covered in dark lightning, the kid confirms that his energy reserves have indeed increased 3- or 4-fold. With his eyes shining with pure emotion, he calls out to the master, feeling the weight of the huge favor he just received for free. Unable to hold it together, Xion jumps and hugs the big guy with all his might, tearfully apologizing for doubting his character. Disgusted by the ridiculous scene, Daeodon pushes the student's head, telling him to let go, but the boy excitedly yells that his hearing even came back. Flashing a warm sideways smile, the veteran tells the crybaby to let go of him already, but the young man refuses to release the tight hug. As the hug continues, the old man resumes his mental conversation, admitting to his invisible partner that the apprentice could have indeed kicked the bucket. Hiding his deep relief, the master acknowledges that the gamble paid off and that the boy only survived because he was naturally strong to begin with. Gripping the hilt of his wide sword tightly, he confesses he had to risk this brutal madness for the boy to evolve quickly and not be useless. Changing the mood out of nowhere, the warrior grabs Xion under his arm like a sack of potatoes, yelling that they need to get a move on. Dangling humiliatingly in the air, the MC angrily asks why the heck he's being carried like luggage again. Flashing a mischievous grin of someone about to pull a stunt, the big guy completely ignores his passenger's complaint. Pointing to the top of the dark cave, Daeodon declares in a hurried tone that their time is up, and they need to get out of there by flying. Instantly, the kid's brain tragically connects the dots, and he lets out a curse, realizing the disaster that's about to happen. Far away, on the arid surface of the open desert, 2 wild scorpions trade violent blows in the sand under the scorching sun. Suddenly, a colossal geyser of sand explodes from the ground with a deafening roar, swallowing the monsters and opening a crater in the world. Flying through the air like a rocket, the big guy laughs like a madman, bragging about his speed, while Xion roars, demanding a normal trip. Paying no mind to his desperate passengers' panic, the old man rudely argues that it's the kid's fault for being out cold for 4 whole days in the nest. While complaining about the apprentice's pathetic life, the master cuts himself off as he notices a weird shadow appearing on the dusty horizon. Completely fed up with dealing with more surprises on this chaotic flight, the MC warily states that absolutely nothing scares him anymore. However, that fake bravado doesn't last a single second as he finally turns his neck and fixes his wide eyes on what the old man is staring at. Floating in the sky like insects, the two of them look tiny before the silhouette of a titanic monster emerging through the air and tearing through the heavy clouds. Completely dumbfounded by the scene, Xion fearfully comments on how it's possible for such a gigantic magic beast to exist when they're dozens of miles away. Landing abruptly on the dry desert floor, Daeodon complains about the lack of peace and reveals that it's the famous mobile fortress known as Archelon. Observing the creature's massive steps up close, The veteran explains that they tame this indestructible bee, ranked turtle, modifying its shell for transport. Pointing at the lethal beast's face, the kid can't believe that ordinary people have the guts to ride on the back of such an immense abomination. Clutching his head, nearly going insane, the MC screams in desperation that this world is way too big and bizarre for his own sanity. Maintaining his usual coolness in the face of danger, the old man adds to the misery, warning that there are far worse beasts with the power to tame that thing. Following the absurd fortress's slow movement across the dunes, the master declares that the boy needs to witness this madness to grow strong. Just then, the doe's sharp eyes catch a small dark spot leaping dozens of meters straight from the turtle's colossal shell in a pure freefall. Landing suddenly in the middle of the soft sand, the newcomer kicks up a huge wall of dust, intercepting the traveler's path head-on. The frightened MC asks who's there, but the warrior tells him to stay quiet. Tensely, he hears the invisible voice continue, saying it's been a long time. Then, a giant old man with one glowing eye emerges from the clouds, revealing his presence as he calls out Diaden's name with great authority.